Over the past few years, there's been a surge in popularity of higher quality budget smartphones sold directly to the consumer online. Most of today's smartphones have been coming from companies based in Shenzhen, China, companies such as Huawei, Xiaomi, and Oppo. Rather than spending large sums of money on marketing and distribution with television ads and brick-and-mortar stores, these companies drastically cut their marketing budgets by selling their phones on the World Wide Web. This allowed these companies to sell higher quality smartphones at almost half the price. In December of 2013, a new brand was created as a subsidiary of Oppo Electronics. Its name, OnePlus. Its mantra, never settle. While many other flagships offered high-end hardware, those best-in-class smartphones often presented compromises, whether it was subpar build quality, a mediocre camera, or a bloated Android skin. With the release of the OnePlus One in April of 2014, OnePlus set out to sell a smartphone that would walk a fine line balancing quality with competitive pricing. The phone featured top-of-the-line hardware for its time, while OnePlus teamed up with software company Cyanogen to create a unique Android skin for the phone. The OnePlus One was well received, as Android enthusiasts cited the phone's outstanding price-to-performance ratio. The phone packed a 5.5-inch 1080p display, a Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 system on a chip, and 3 GB of RAM. As for the phone's software, OnePlus partnered with the now-defunct ROM maker Cyanogen. While the phone was priced at only $349, the phone was very hard to get a hold of, as OnePlus used an invite system to control demand and increase hype surrounding the device. 15 months later, OnePlus unveiled its successor to the original flagship killer, named the OnePlus 2. Following the success of the One, OnePlus generated a massive amount of hype for its second handset, possibly setting people's expectations too high. While the OnePlus 2 was among the first smartphones to feature a USB Type-C charging port and 4 GB of RAM, the phone was heavily criticized for its lack of near-field communication technology and its inclusion of the highly controversial Snapdragon 810 system on a chip by Qualcomm. The OnePlus 2 also brought OnePlus's own Android skin dubbed Oxygen OS. Only months after launching the OnePlus 2, the small Chinese startup marketed as a brand for tech enthusiasts tried to target the budget-conscious, fashion-savvy consumer with a beautiful, compact, glass and metal smartphone called the OnePlus X. This smartphone created a problem for the company, as its core demographic, the tech enthusiasts, weren't interested in the phone, while the average consumer OnePlus targeted with the OnePlus X simply weren't familiar with the OnePlus brand. After less than a year, the OnePlus X was discontinued and forgotten. In June of 2016, OnePlus showed the world its third flagship smartphone without an invite system, while also dropping the flagship killer moniker. The OnePlus 3 brought a drastic change in the company's design language, replacing OnePlus's trademark sandstone back cover for a metal unibody design. While the OnePlus 3 ushered in a new design language for the company, OnePlus finally did away with its highly criticized invite system. Is this OnePlus's best phone yet? How does it stack up against the competition? How's it going, everybody? This is Matt D, and this is my full review of the OnePlus 3. The OnePlus 3 is constructed of metal, taking design cues from phones such as the HTC M series, the iPhone 6s, and Huawei Mate devices, among others. While the phone offers a high-end, ultra-premium feel in the hand, this new design is a big departure from the design language of OnePlus's previous two flagship phones. Gone is the sandstone backing that became OnePlus's trademark. However, fans of OnePlus's sandstone texture can purchase a sandstone case for the OnePlus 3 from OnePlus's online storefront. Similar to the style swap covers sold for the OnePlus 2, OnePlus sells additional cases for its third flagship in rosewood, black apricot, Kevlar, and bamboo textures. The OnePlus 3's display is a 5.5-inch optic AMOLED display with a resolution of 1080p and a pixel density of 401 ppi. While OnePlus calls this Samsung-built display optic AMOLED, it's basically a Super AMOLED panel where the display is bonded to the front glass. More importantly, this display is comprised of a diamond pentile pixel layout. While Oxygen OS does allow the user to adjust the display's color temperature, the operating system also brings proximity wake and ambient display features. Below the display, you'll find the OnePlus 3's incredibly fast fingerprint scanner flanked by two configurable capacitive navigation buttons. On the right-hand side of its summer 2016 flagship, OnePlus has placed the phone's power button just below the phone's SIM tray, which accommodates two nano SIMs. The top of the phone is clean with no notable features. Moving over to the left-hand side of the OnePlus 3, there's the phone's volume rocker below OnePlus's trademark alert slider, allowing the user to toggle between receiving all notifications, notifications from priority contacts, or none at all. Finally, at the bottom of the OnePlus 3, there's a speaker and a 3.5mm headphone jack flanking the phone's USB Type-C charging port. Turning over to the rear of OnePlus's third flagship phone, the phone houses a 16-megapixel rear camera by Sony with phase detection autofocus and optical image stabilization. Below the sensor, there's a lone LED flash. The OnePlus 3 is powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 system on a chip, accompanied by an Adreno 530 GPU. While OnePlus's third premier phone comes with 64GB of non-expandable UFS 2.0 storage, the phone boasts a whopping 6GB of RAM. At the time of the OnePlus 3's release, I thought 6GB of RAM was overkill for a smartphone, but other manufacturers have matched the phone's specs over the past few months. Powering the OnePlus 3 is a 3000 mAh battery. As for cellular connectivity, the OnePlus 3 is capable of running on any LTE and GSM-based cellular networks throughout the world. In addition to the standard Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GPS connectivity found on most smartphones, OnePlus brought NFC back with the OnePlus 3 after facing serious backlash for not incorporating NFC technology into 2015's OnePlus 2. The OnePlus 3 is now running OxygenOS 4.0 built atop Android 7.0 Nougat. This latest version of OnePlus's own Android skin combines the best elements of OxygenOS with the most recent iteration of Google's mobile operating system. To start things off, this fusion of OxygenOS with Android Nougat brings a redesigned notification shade. Like what I mentioned in my reviews of the Nexus 6P and Nexus 5X, Android 7.0 brings a redesigned notification shade that spans the entire width of the OnePlus 3's screen. Plus, the user can reply to a notification simply by tapping on it. Also, OnePlus's customizable panel of quick toggles returns in OxygenOS 4.0. Another big feature that Android 7.0 now brings to OxygenOS is the new multi-window feature on the OnePlus 3, allowing the user to run two apps on the same screen. Plus, double tapping on the recent apps key will take you back to your previously opened app. Looking at the OxygenOS home screens, OnePlus's fourth major iteration of OxygenOS comes with built-in DPI scaling. The 5 tiers of scaling allow text and icons to shrink, allowing the user to include more information on the phone's home screen. While the DPI scaling has changed, the persistent Google search bar is now gone. Elsewhere in the UI, the toggle switches in the notification shade now default to a shade of blue, while you can also find the same settings menu sidebar included in stock Android 7.0. Also, while the user can now choose between default, light, and dark menu themes, OxygenOS now allows you to choose what icons can and cannot appear in the status bar. Going back to the staple features of OxygenOS, OnePlus has included its Shelf panel at the OS's leftmost home screen. In addition to that, OxygenOS was one of the first Android skins to allow the end user to modify the toggles in the Android notification shade. On top of that, OnePlus actually beat Google to the punch in adding user-configurable app permissions into the operating system. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that the fingerprint scanner on the OnePlus 3 is flanked by user-defined navigation keys. For example, an individual used to the stock Android navigation button layout, like myself, can set the left capacitive key as a back button and use the right button to access the recent apps screen. On the other hand, someone more accustomed to Samsung's button layout may prefer to set those two buttons in the exact opposite configuration. Like many other Android skins on the market, OxygenOS brings support for a handful of on-screen gestures. For example, there's a double tap to wake gesture along with other gestures to control the camera, flashlight, and music playback. In addition to the gestures, OnePlus has added a system-wide dark UI mode into OxygenOS, which provides deep blacks on the phone's AMOLED display. Lastly, OxygenOS gives the user the opportunity to modify colors of OnePlus 3's notification LED on a per-app basis. OnePlus's flagship for the first half of 2016 comes with a 16-megapixel Sony IMX298 sensor with an aperture of f2.0, phase detection autofocus, and optical image stabilization. Below the camera is a single-tone LED flash. The OnePlus 3's secondary camera houses an 8-megapixel Sony IMX179 sensor with an aperture of f2.0 where it'll shoot video in up to 1080p resolution. The OxygenOS camera app comes packed to the gills with features to satisfy the smartphone photography enthusiast. A settings cog adjacent to the shutter button reveals a menu giving the user control over aspect ratio, a timer, and a grid for using the rule of thirds. On the opposite side of the screen there's a menu button presenting a long list of shooting modes such as time-lapse, slow motion, panorama, and a manual shooting mode. As you might expect, the manual mode allows you to change white balance, ISO, exposure, and shutter speed, but not much beyond those settings. When testing the phase detection autofocus built into the OnePlus 3's rear camera, the phone's primary camera was able to quickly switch focus between objects in the foreground and background of a scene. The Sony IMX298 on the rear of the phone captures a lot of detail when the lighting is right, producing some very impressive images. However, this camera seems to produce noisy images in low light as most smartphones do. Here are some more pictures taken with the OnePlus 3 as well as some video samples. When testing the OnePlus 3, I ran my usual set of popular benchmarking apps, Antutu, Quadrant, and Geekbench. To evaluate the phone's cellular connectivity, I used speedtest.net, LTE Discovery, and OpenSignal. Antutu gave my unit a score of 142,403. Geekbench gave the phone a single-core score of 2,433, along with a multi-core score of 5,611. Finally, Quadrant returned a score of 42,840. I tested my OnePlus 3 in the northern suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia on both AT&T and T-Mobile US. The phone clocked download speeds ranging from 1.16 to 50.42 megabits per second, along with upload speeds ranging between 0.7 and 18.5 megabits per second. To drill down even further, the phone connected to T-Mobile's LTE network on band 4, as well as the stronger 700 MHz frequencies on band 12. As for AT&T, the OnePlus 3 connected to that carrier's LTE network on band 17. According to the website OpenSignal, which compares connectivity strength and coverage of America's 4 wireless networks, T-Mobile seems to have the strongest signal in my area, while the website ranks AT&T as the third best carrier. When I last recorded the Dash Charger's charging time, the phone charged from 0 to 60% in about 30 minutes, right on par with OnePlus's claims. When I last monitored how quickly the OnePlus 3's battery discharged, the phone's battery went from 60 down to about 10% in about 7 hours. When reviewing the phone's battery performance, I would typically keep screen brightness at about 75%. Also, I would take advantage of Wi-Fi when available with cellular data turned off. I kept NFC and Bluetooth turned off as I rarely ever had a need to use them. Lastly, I would usually disable everything except for voice calls before bed. During the review period, my unit was able to get as much as 3.5 to 4 hours of screen on time. These results were based on my own personal usage habits, so keep in mind, your mileage will vary. Moving on to audio quality, I don't think the OnePlus 3 speakers produce enough volume to compete with everyday noise. I found that places with even moderate noise levels would drown out the OnePlus 3 while watching videos. While I'm pleased with the sound produced through headphones connected to my OnePlus 3, I don't notice much of a difference in the integrated equalizer in Oxygen OS versus Max Audio on the OnePlus 1. Anyway, here's a quick speaker test. While I like the phone's overall design, I think the body of the OnePlus 3 is just too thin for my taste, making the phone tougher to grip when shooting pictures or video with the rear camera. Rather than competing with Apple's obsession of having the thinnest smartphone on the market, OnePlus should have eliminated the camera hump by including a bigger battery. I really don't see any benefit of having a thinner than average smartphone with mediocre battery life. Overall, I'm happy with the quality of the OnePlus 3's Samsung-built AMOLED display. While some of the more seasoned tech reviewers have complained about the phone's display resolution of only 1080p, I typically don't watch videos at above 1080p resolution because even with a reliable internet connection, Quad HD videos on devices such as my Nexus 6P pause constantly for buffering, spoiling the viewing experience. However, one complaint I do have is that this AMOLED display doesn't get bright enough for outdoor viewing. In the late fall of 2016, just 5 months after the release of the OnePlus 3, OnePlus discontinued the phone, replacing it with a minor upgrade called the OnePlus 3T. This is analogous to how Apple releases an iterative upgrade to the iPhone every other year, denoted by an S in the iPhone's name. I think this was a poor choice by OnePlus, as some customers were waiting for their standard OnePlus 3s to ship when the OnePlus 3T was unveiled in a Facebook livestream. While OnePlus certainly upset many of its customers by launching the 3T only 5 months after its predecessor, I think OnePlus was motivated to create the 3T when Google prepared to launch its Pixel smartphone compatible with Google's new Daydream VR technology. On one hand, I feel that OnePlus should have waited a little longer in finalizing its plans for the original OnePlus 3 to incorporate the Qualcomm Snapdragon 821 into the phone. On the other hand, OnePlus could have lost a lot of sales to its competition had the company held off on launching the OnePlus 3, waiting for Qualcomm's more powerful chipset. Perhaps it was just a case of bad timing. One big area of concern I have about the future of the OnePlus 3 pertains to OnePlus's track record on software updates. While the OnePlus 1 is out of the picture with the death of Cyanogen, it is unknown whether OnePlus will continue to support 2015's OnePlus 2 with future software updates. Although the company seems to have killed the budget-friendly OnePlus X, OnePlus stated that the 3 and the 3T will receive software updates simultaneously. Let's hope OnePlus keeps its word over the next year or two. Now, as you're watching this review, you may be asking yourself, should I buy the OnePlus 3 or the 3T? If you don't already own the older OnePlus 3, I would recommend you consider the 3T over the original OnePlus 3. As I mentioned previously, the 3T is powered by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 821 system on a chip. While both of OnePlus's 2016 flagships come with 6GB of RAM, the company offers a more expensive version of the 3T packing 128GB of non-expandable storage. On top of that, the 3T has a bigger battery and a 16-megapixel front-facing camera. If you already own the older OnePlus 3, I recommend you pass on the 3T as the newer device is really only a minor upgrade over its predecessor. To sum it all up, OnePlus took its design language in a whole new direction with the OnePlus 3. With its high-end internal hardware, excellent rear camera, and proprietary dash charge technology, the phone cemented OnePlus's status as a formidable player in the market for upper mid-range flagship smartphones. As always, if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up down below and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos in the future. It's totally free. If you want to see my previous coverage of the OnePlus 3, check the video description for the links to those videos below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.